This series of videos is designed to assist players in learning LWRS or Bewegungskrieg. The training video is applicable to the standard version of LWRS and all reformatted versions of LWRS called Bewegungskrieg. Part 6 covers close combat. Close combat occurs during the combat phase. Close combat is a type of direct fire but occurs when opposing elements are in base-to-base contact with each other. It's assumed the attacking elements are attempting to move in the area occupied by the defending elements and, in turn, attempting to dislodge them. Unlike direct fire, close combat is repeated until one or both sides are forced to retreat. A player initiates close combat when they move elements, normally a combat unit or battalion, into base-to-base contact with an enemy combat unit or battalion. This occurs during the movement phase. Because of the variable nature of movement, the final state before the close combat occurs can be highly unpredictable. This process will be covered in a future video on movement. At the beginning of the combat phase, all close combats are obvious. As been covered in earlier videos, prior to this state, all aircraft support and artillery fire support would have been conducted, with the possible result that some battalions would have suffered losses or are disordered. Only elements in base-to-base contact with an opponent is involved in close combat. Other elements can, however, provide support with fire combat. This can occur all at once or in any stage or order the owning player wishes. For example, the German player may decide to conduct close combat first, view the results, and then conduct fire combat. This could be reversed, but there is normally little point in this, so most players just calculate the total number of dice to use and throw them all at once. The basic 5-point values of elements are infantry 1 FP, heavy weapons and anti-tank guns 2 FP, artillery 3 FP. In practice, the special rules are so extensive that the final 5-point value can be very different from these values stated. In this case, it's best to cross-reference the element type with these special conditions in a chart, as you can see here. Missing from this chart are vehicles, which have no fire combat value in the standard rules. Some nationalities mounted machine guns or other weapons into such a vehicle, in which case they would be treated as a heavy weapon for fire combat and a vehicle as a target. Also note that the values shown may differ from fire combat values. These values only apply to elements in close combat. There are two types of infantry. Standard infantry with 1 FP and heavy weapons with 2 FP. Heavy weapons basically represents medium machine guns or heavy machine guns. In close combat, both these weapons have the ability to affect armoured elements, unlike fire combat at a distance. Guns, both towed or in vehicles, are grouped into three types. These are with no high explosive, with high explosive, and with very effective high explosive. 2 cm cannons would typically have no HE, while 7.5 cm guns would have HE and 15 cm guns would have very effective HE. The fire points available to use against infantry, including heavy weapons or guns, vary according to these groupings or types and range from 1 to 2 FP. Note that this is different to direct fire at range. When targeting a soft vehicle, count as grade 0 armoured vehicle with a maximum possible FP of 4. This is an optional rule and players may choose to use a different value, as this does give guns a significant advantage if they're very large. On the other hand, it's rare to encounter a soft vehicle unless the player makes a mistake, so I would suggest using this optional rule. When conducting close combat against armoured vehicle, you compare the gun and armour grade. If a gun is 1 grade greater, the FP rises from 2 to 3. If it's 2, it rises to 4. In the opposite direction, it drops to 1 FP and half an FP. If firing at a soft vehicle, a grade 3 gets a +2, which means it has 4 FP or 4 dice. This assumes you use that optional rule. Let's look at a specific example. In this case, a battalion of Panzer IIs have moved into close combat during the movement phase. During the combat phase, the close combat occurs. The infantry have 1 fire point against the German Panzer IIs, while the Panzer IIs have 1 fire point against the Polish infantry, as their main gun lacks HE. There are 3 elements on each side, so both players throw 3 D6. This is going to be a long and drawn out close combat, with the infantry most likely winning. In the modern period, infantry and heavy weapons can be equipped with anti-tank missiles or ATGWs. These give infantry additional effectiveness against armoured vehicles in close combat. As ATGWs normally have a fairly long minimal range, this is probably not due to the actual ATGWs, but due to other weapons such as LWRS, MORS, anti-tank rocket launchers, etc., which may also be carried by these troops. If an element receives a hit during close combat, or direct fire for that matter, they can attempt a save throw. In most cases, a D6 die roll of 5 or 6 will save against a hit. The player making the save throw can also modify the die roll with defensive modifiers listed here. The unusual modifier here is fatigue, the theory being if you are fatigued, you are better at avoiding casualties because you spend more time trying to avoid combat. I'm uncertain of the logic here, so I expect it was designed to balance out some issue with the game system. The quality difference is also of interest. I expect this to be negative. The target quality is less than the firer. Players may choose to always use a natural 1 as a save, regardless of the defensive modifiers. However, I rarely ever find this is required. While these terms come from another set of rules, I find them useful here. I call the first round of close combat the close assault, with one side defending and the other side initiating the close assault. The first round of close combat will typically also include any direct fire support, so is unusual. While direct fire is not specifically part of close combat, it can be used to support the close assault, or first round of close combat. I call this close support, and to ensure a close combat is successful, I will always place a second line of elements behind the attacking line, which provides close support. The defender can also take advantage of close support. Close combat is a type of direct fire which occurs when elements are engaged with each other. While it uses many of the same rules and concepts as direct fire, a close assault will use different fire points, is repeated until someone wins or both loses, and results in movement, such as a retreat from combat and occupying the defender's position. Aircraft can provide air support and artillery can provide fire support. However, this occurs during the support phase and before any direct fire or close combat occurs. Let's look at another example. During the movement phase, the German tanks move into contact with the Polish infantry. The motorised infantry then move up behind the German tanks. During the aircraft subphase, air support occurs. In this case, we'll assume no disorder has occurred. During the artillery subphase, fire support occurs. Again, we will assume no disorder. During the first combat round, which I'll call close assault, the Germans total all D6 dice to be used by elements conducting close combat and all elements conducting direct fire. You cannot split this attack hoping to cause 2 disorders. Thus, each round during the combat phase is a single disorder cause. I'm making some assumptions here, but this seems reasonable. A few questions may arise. Does the direct fire occur first and then followed by the close combat, thus in theory allowing for 2 disorders? This may be possible, but the way I play is that the first round of close combat includes all direct fire and close combat, and if a disorder occurs, this is the first disorder. Then for each round of close combat, a second disorder could occur. I'm uncertain if this is the designer's intention, and I could be completely wrong, but this is the way I play it. Now we are left with simple close combat, which repeats until one side or both sides withdraw. This can result in very heavy losses, and an attacker is wise to avoid this type of attrition. It's better to win in the first round, and if you have failed, then retreat to try again, unless of course you have a major advantage over the defender and expect to win in 1 or 2 rounds with minimal losses. The rules do not make any difference between mounted or dismounted infantry. Motorised infantry are supposed to dismount before they get into contact, while troops in armoured fighting vehicles fight with their vehicles. It's true that in many cases infantry mounted in trucks will dismount 1 to 5 kilometres from the front line and move on foot, but in some cases the troop will fight in and around their vehicles. The Germans developed a number of specific combat transports to allow this, and the famous Jeep with the mounted machine gun was used by reconnaissance troops. I covered this in a lot more detail in my previous video. In conclusion, the close combat is the key element of the game, and almost everything else is designed to support this activity. Good players will pick a spot, hit it with aircraft and artillery until it disorders, then close into combat and with good close support in the form of direct fire, quickly causes second disorder in the first round. In a worst case, you may not achieve this, but as long as the attacker is not disordered and the defender is disordered, you can keep on pounding away until you get your second disorder. The moment it becomes impossible to inflict a disorder, or the casualties are not significantly in your favour, you should accept you have lost the close combat and withdraw. This will typically lose you a level of victory, so make sure it does not occur. This concludes part 6 of my LWRS training video series. I have no idea what part 7 will be, but I'm sure it'll be exciting. Denken Sie daran, immer vorher Heimatland zu kämpfen. Lightning War Red Storm was written by Andrew Stevenson. The current version, designed for both World War II and modern conflicts, is dated 2013. However, earlier versions were available as early as 2008. The rules use company-size elements, each consisting of 3 steps or strength points. These elements form battalions, and the basic combat unit is the battalion. The combat system uses a simple lots of D6 combat mechanism, and the sequence of play is an initiative-based movement phase system, followed by a fire phase. There is nothing revolutionary, but the package works very well. Bewegungskrieg version 1 is a reformatted version of the original rules with errata. Included are any corrections, additional numbering, updated tables, and additional cross-referencing. There is no changes to the original rules. All credits for the game design and rules go to Andrew Stevenson. Bewegungskrieg version 2 is an enhanced version of the original rules with errata. Included are any corrections, additional numbering, updated tables, and additional cross-referencing. Also included are optional rules such as terrain, weather, setup, or any other rules which fill gaps in the original rules. This version of the rules includes additional diagrams, figures, and commentary. The original rules are unchanged, but additional rules have been added to fill any gaps. Any credit for the game system and design goes to Andrew Stevenson. Allen guten Dingo, gehen zu Ende.